Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to Elderwerks Caregiving the First Year and Beyond. We're going to talk about caregiving today, some of the difficulties of it, and we may be able to resolve some of your problems just by kind of talking you through it. So let's talk first how many people actually are caregivers. There's a very large amount. Approximately 43.5 million Americans caregive and have provided unpaid care for an adult or a child in the last 12 months. And the majority of the caregivers, 82% of them care for one or more adults, while 15% care for two adults, and 3% care for three or more adults, if you can believe that. About 34.2 million Americans have provided unpaid care to an adult age 50 or older in the last 12 months, and approximately 39.8%, almost 40% million caregivers provide care for adults 18 and older with a disability or a chronic illness, or almost 17% of Americans. Estimating the impact of caregiving and employment on well-being, outcomes and insights in health management is the one that provides that. So if we look at about 15.7 million adult family caregivers care for someone who has Alzheimer's disease or another dementia. The financial effect of caregiving, the values of services provided by informal caregiving has steadily increased over the last decade, and with estimated economic value, we're looking at $470 billion in 2013. We're way over that right now. Every time we do a program, we try to go into and look at what is the most updated. And unfortunately, if we look at, bullet point 2, the AARP is the one that provided those numbers, and that was in 2015. So when we look at that, it may not be up to date, but apologetically, I think it is. We're not getting the information. Caregivers are too busy to give the information. The next, we look at financial concerns of caregivers. I just did a program this morning on Lewy body, and we talked about the financial cares and setting up end-of-life care plans for that person. So the average income of the average caregiver is about $42,000. And family caregivers spend about $7,000 a year on caregiving. We look at long-distance caregivers who must factor in their travel and outside help, and this leads to about $11,000, almost $12,000 a year. It does have a negative effect on employment. Most caregivers have to cut back their hours, or they may have to work a different shift. I know someone who's taking care of her mother who has dementia, and she's a night shift nurse. So she comes home from work, gets her mom up, gets her ready, and stays with her for most of the day until dad comes home from work, and she can get to sleep before she goes back to work at night. So we also see that many times one must leave their job to become a full-time caregiver. So if their average income is about $42,000 and that's combined, and we have someone leaving, we're losing quite a bit of revenue that's coming into the house to live on, which can be very, very difficult. Most caregivers are women. About 65% of caregivers are female. The younger the care recipient, the more likely the recipient is to be male. We see in different cultures that younger caregivers and males are more prominent. And in our African American communities, we do see that families will It's a cultural thing, and families always will take care of families, whether they're male or female. But we do see an influx in that population. 45% of recipients ages 18 to 45 are male, while 33% of recipients aged 50 or higher are male. And if we look at this next one, we say that 75% of all caregivers are female, and may spend as much as 50% more time providing care than males. Male caregivers are less likely to provide personal care, but 24% helped a loved one get dressed compared to 28% of female caregivers. We're really good about, as far as male caregivers, they're good about trying to cook, trying to clean, trying to get mom or dad dressed in the morning. But if you look at those tasks, like bathing your mother or a female counterpart that you're taking care of, that can be very difficult. That's where they may need some help because it's just uncomfortable for them. There are special caregiver groups. There are sandwich generation. So I'm part of the sandwich generation. I took care of both my father-in-law and my mother. My father-in-law had a stroke, and then he had dementia after that. And my mother had Alzheimer's disease. When my father-in-law had his stroke, I had 3 kids in college. I'm sorry, 1 in high school and 2 in college. And so I needed to work full time. I was paying my husband and I were paying 2 college tuitions. And so we had to figure out what we were going to do and still get my youngest back and forth to school and sporting events that he was involved in and things like that, because I believe it was his junior year. So we had 2 years to go before he'd be off to college. But he was also engaged in a lot of activities that we wanted to be there for. You have children and you want to support them as well. So my husband and I were fortunate enough, we worked together and we found a very good adult daycare, and we were able to send Dad off to daycare. My husband got him up and fed him every morning and got him dressed for daycare. And I started work I was working surgical prep at that time, and I was at work by 4:30 in the morning. So, but I got back about 2:00 in the afternoon from that job. And so what I would do is at 3:30, 4:00, after I sat down and kind of, de-stressed, I would go over and pick Dad up from daycare. So we were able to maintain our full-time jobs. When my mom had Alzheimer's disease, we cared for her at home as long as we could, and then we had to place her in a community. I was very, very fortunate to work at that community at that time, and so I did see my mother every day. So being part of a sandwich generation, I probably had it easier than a lot of people who are single family or single parent families that are trying to caregive for their mom or dad or someone. LGBTQ plus caregivers. Let me start by saying that unfortunately for LGBTQ plus people, oftentimes their families divorce them from that person. And so they're not getting the support from their family. What they have in the LGBTQ plus community are chosen families where someone has accepted them into their family. But they may not provide caregiving for them. So for that population, it may be difficult to find someone to caregive for you. And you're very lucky if you do. And then, like I said, we look at various cultural groups, and we know that in certain cultural groups that family members actually will take care of their own. I do a program called Cultural Diversity in Dementia Care, and it talks about how each diverse cultural group actually takes care of that person with dementia. And for many cultural groups, it stems from the nuclear family. But it doesn't make a difference which one you are here. It's difficult to be a caregiver. There is, other than dementia, there really are various reasons for caregiving: chronic illness, aging parents or other family members, dementia and other cognitive diseases, accidents, where you're bedbound for a long time, a cancer diagnosis, stroke, COPD or CHF. Those are some of the reasons that we caregive for people. People's brains jump right to dementia and then cancer, but there's other things. When you have end stage CHF or COPD, you're not going to be able to do a lot of the things that you normally could do, and your family member or that caregiver is going to have to start taking that responsibility. We also play multiple roles. We are caregivers. So we provide that care. We coordinate that care. That might be making appointments for the doctor, making appointments for physical or occupational therapy, and getting them to those appointments. Information resources, letting the physical therapist know what this person's personhood is, or what was their diagnosis, and have they had physical therapy before. This is important information that the care professionals need to know. You advocate for them. I just advocated yesterday for a family member because they were not getting a phone call back from a doctor who was supposed to schedule surgery for this person 3 weeks ago. And I finally got on the phone because I'm a healthcare provider. I knew how to muscle my way through the pecking order to make sure that this got scheduled, because there obviously was a disconnect when we found out why he was not being scheduled for this procedure. And we're also emotional supporters. They lean on us for those times when things are not so good for them. And then lastly, we're that quality sentinel. I know that for myself, just because I'm a healthcare provider, one thing I will not allow is anybody in my family to go to the hospital and be overnight at a hospital without me sitting at the bedside. If I have to sit up all night for that person, I will. And I know that's not something everybody can do, but we need to be there. We need to ask questions. And if the doctor doesn't want to answer your questions, you need to get rid of that doctor. That's not a quality doctor if they're being remiss about answering your questions. If they're doing a dressing change and they drop a dressing on the floor, and this has happened, and they go to put it on the skin, you say, stop there, you're not doing that. So we are always quality sentinels, and I encourage you to do that. Part of that, again, is asking those questions. Why are you doing that? I don't understand that. I know one time when my husband was in the hospital, I was there with him overnight, and he had been medicated because he had an NG tube in, and he was very uncomfortable. And they came in the middle of the night and they said, okay, Mr. Patrick, it's time for your insulin. Well, my husband is not and was not a diabetic. And I sat straight up in that chair and I said, you need to stop now. That insulin would have killed him. And so we need to think about speaking up, and that's really important to do that. And if they get their feathers ruffled, just too bad. So here's some responsibility of caregivers, but obviously this is not all inclusive, and it's going to change from day to day. You buy groceries, you cook, you clean, you do the laundry. You may help with getting that person dressed and bathed. You may help prepare or give medications. You may make medical appointments or drive someone to the doctor or the pharmacy. You connect with doctors, care managers, and others to understand what needs to be done. And you may spend time at work to handle crises or make plans to help family members who are sick. You may be designated that on-call family member for problems. If there's more than one sibling in the family, that is a duty that I would spread around a little bit. I'm not on call today. So if anything happens with mom or dad, you need to take care of it, as long as everybody understands the plan. I always say that you're the boots on the ground. You get there, your boots on the ground, you start acting right away. And family caregivers must have the knowledge and sustained engagement with healthcare professionals. It's critical because it really makes the medical and psychological components of care successful for that person that you're caring for. Because I've talked about some of the difficulties with caregiving, let's talk about some of the positive aspects of caregiving. First of all, sense of giving back to someone. I think everybody wants to feel like they're needed, and how it makes you feel. It makes you feel like you did something positive for someone else. Also, satisfaction that their loved one is getting excellent care. And we see some personal growth and increased meaning in our lives when we help someone else. I think it's really good that we model this for the next generation. When my father-in-law had his stroke, and he was home with us for about 18 months, and he lived on the first floor in our family room, but he had a significant second stroke, and he was not able to get up and move at all. And we were not able to provide the care 24/7 that we needed to. So we ended up having to place Dad in a community. And every Sunday, my kids would come with me and my husband, and we would visit Dad, and he typically was eating breakfast at that time. We asked if we could sit at a table with him, and the nurses said no. So we stood at the table and talked to Dad while he was having breakfast, and then we would take him from the table and do some activity with him. But this particular day, the nurse came in and she said, "I'm sick of you coming every day at breakfast. You're disturbing everybody else, and you need to find a different time to come." Well, my 3 kids were involved in activities, extracurricular activities, and they were giving up part of their Sunday to come and visit their grandfather. We walked out because I was embarrassed and frustrated, and I got halfway out the door and I said, "Stop, I'm going back in. You guys get in the car." And I went back in and I asked for that nurse, and I really laid the line on for her. And I said, "Do you understand that I'm showing my kids what caregiving is and how important it is for them to know that it's important for them to be there for the older adults in their lives?" And I said, "This will never happen again. You either find us a seat where we can sit with my dad, my father-in-law, and visit at breakfast, because that's when he was the most awake and he needed help with feeding anyways, and we were able to do that. Or I'm calling the administrator, and this is going to change real quick." So sometimes you have to be kind of harsh about that, but it was important for my father-in-law to be with his family at that time. And it was important for my kids to really understand the importance of caregiving for older adults. One thing that you can do, and I have done this, is hire a care manager. About a year and a half ago, I have an aunt that doesn't have any children, and I was her POA, and she had a stroke. She was in the hospital, and they were doing all kinds of tests and different things on her. Now, I'm a retired nurse. I spent 22 years in labor and delivery. I spent the rest of my career most of it in education. I worked in different areas, but primarily it was labor and delivery and then education. So I have to admit that I don't know the mechanics of a hospital much anymore. Things have changed since I left the bedside. And I wanted to make sure that my aunt was getting quality care. And I was worried that I wasn't getting the right answers from the healthcare staff, nurses, physical therapists, and stuff. So I hired a care manager. They're also called case managers. They may be social workers or registered nurses. But what they do is they help navigate the healthcare system. They answer questions and look at the diagnosis that you may not understand, and they're going to help you with transport to and from appointments if that's necessary. We didn't need that. And they have a good understanding of the hospital care system and the etiquette. So our care manager would call the nurse's station every morning to get report from the nurse. And by the time I got there at 8 o'clock in the morning, I had a report ready for me. She would tell me what tests she was having that day, why they were doing them, were there any changes in her care, any changes in her health, I'm sorry. And I had all that information so I could make sound decisions because I was her POA. This particular one charged, I thought it was very reasonable. It was $50 an hour. It was only when you needed them. And she billed on a monthly basis. And I felt that every penny I spent was well worth it because my aunt got excellent care. And I based it on the fact that my care manager knew what was going on and her POA knew what was going on. And we could ask those questions to the healthcare staff. So it's a good idea. You may want to think about that. All right. So like I said, most of the people that someone will care for may have dementia. Just keep in mind that dementia is a group of symptoms that may be caused by several disorders that affect the brain. And people with dementia have notably impaired cognitive functioning. That's going to interfere with normal activities and relationships. They're going to lose their ability to problem solve. They may lose their ability to maintain emotional control. You'll see some personality changes, and you'll also see some behavioral problems. While memory loss is common, it's not always means that that person has dementia. To be diagnosed with dementia, a person must have deficits in 2 or more brain functions, such as memory or language skills, or sensory or loss of consciousness. So you have to have 2 or more of those. So looking at dementia, like I said, it's an overall description. We call it the umbrella term. And you can see under there that Alzheimer's is the most significant. About 60 to 80% of people with dementia have Alzheimer's disease. Then there's Lewy body dementia, which is the second leading cause. And then we look at vascular dementia right behind that. Frontal temporal dementia is right behind that one. And then we look at other diseases like Parkinson's disease and Huntington's. Depends on who you talk to. Some people say there's 100 forms of dementia. Some people say there's 50 forms of dementia. These are the ones that are the most common. We know that it's chronic and persistent, and there is no known cure for any of them. That each one of them causes significant damage to the brain. And really the type of dementia and symptoms depend on which region of the brain is becoming damaged. We also know that any of the symptoms that you see with dementia are not a normal part of aging. However, you may see some of these symptoms of dementia in a person who typically was acting and behaving normally, and then all of a sudden you start to see some changes. And those changes may be due more to a physical problem, such as dehydration. It could be maybe a low vitamin B12. It could be a low vitamin D. It could be a thyroid problem. There's a lot of different things, metabolic problems, that will cause changes in someone's cognition. One of the things that caregivers need to understand is that the communication process is going to change when someone has dementia. And the reason it changes is because dementia, any one of them, is a disease of the brain. Your typical communication process starts here with someone interpreting and encoding a message. So I want to send a message to someone else. And this takes seconds. We don't even know we're doing it. So I'm thinking about dinner tonight, and I think to my husband, I really have a taste for pizza. So I send him a message. Either I talk to him, I send him an email, I text him, or I yell into the next room at him and say, hey, I'm hungry for pizza tonight. I have a taste for pizza. Do you want that? That gets into his brain, goes into that processing center of his brain. He interprets that message, and then he decodes it, and he gives you feedback. And he might say, I went out with the boys last night and we had pizza. So I'm really not in the mood for pizza, but I'll get you some. All right. So you get an answer to your question. In between here, there's lots of noise. The noise could be environmental noise. The noise could be in your head. Phone might be ringing and you might be thinking, I got to answer that and he's not answering my question. So there's a lot of different types of noise that occur when you're communicating in that process. We learn to block out that noise. When you have changes in the brain, there is difficulty encoding, interpreting, and decoding a message, which is why oftentimes when you talk to someone and they are having difficulties answering you, you may not get an answer from them. One of the reasons is they may have deterioration of language skills and fluency. They also will lose their ability to initiate or sustain conversations. You may find difficulty in understanding and processing information, and you may see impaired interpretation of verbal and nonverbal cues. So those are some of the reasons you're going to see difficulty. One of the things that happens is the processing slows down. So the processing for you and I to interpret something, decode it, and shoot back something may be quick. But if we ask that person just the question, it may take at least 15 seconds for them to process that and respond to whatever you said. So I'm going to give you 15 seconds starting right now, and I'm not going to talk for 15 seconds. Okay, and I'm going to ask you how many people who have been caregiving for a person or know someone with dementia has given them that 15 seconds for them to respond. That's probably one of the most important things that you can do when you communicate with a person living with dementia is allow them 15 seconds to process what you are saying. It's a practice that it's hard to keep, but we have to do that. So unique communication needs of people living with dementia is understanding their unique communication needs and how we adapt to those capabilities. We want to make sure that we're talking in sentences that are not too long, get to the point, try to keep your emotion out of it. If you're anxious about something and you're asking them a question, whatever emotion you're feeling, they're going to feel it. So keep it clear and simple. If you're giving them instructions or directions, you give them one at a time. Joan, I'd like you to get up because we're going to go to the dining room, or we're going to get our coats on to go out for a ride. Joan, let's get our coat on now. And then you help Joan with her coat. Joan, can I help you zipper your coat? It's chilly out today. So do you see how it's not, get your coat on, we're going for a ride, you need to zipper it up. All right. So you have to speak slowly and clearly and use one-step instructions. They have a real challenge with concentration and maintaining attention. And you need concentration and attention when you're conversing with someone. That's why they forget in the middle of the conversation. They're going to get off track about talking because they don't have the ability to concentrate and pay attention like we do. They're also easily distracted and have difficulty completing tasks. They have difficulty answering questions, and they may feel real overwhelmed by too many choices. So here's some of their strategies for effective communication with a person living with dementia. Simplify and clarify your message, like I just said. Avoid arguing with them. If they see something or they say something and the statement doesn't make any sense to you, or what they see doesn't make any sense to you, the one thing you don't want to argue with is a person with dementia, because in their world, that's the truth. It may not be the truth in your world. However, you're cognitively intact where you can bring yourself to their world, be in their world, and help them understand what's going on, where they can't come into your world. So if someone says, I heard the ice cream truck is coming today down the street and I want some ice cream, instead of saying, no, it's wintertime, we're not going to have ice cream today, you might say, oh, really? Well, you know what? If it's not here by 3 o'clock, maybe I'll tell George to pick up some ice cream on the way home so we can enjoy some ice cream tonight. So you're validating that they think there's getting ice cream from the ice cream truck today, but you're also saying, if you really want this, we can go to the store and get it. Use nonverbal clues and gestures to support your message. So pointing, not pointing at them, but, would you like to go over there? Or you might point at your clock and say, it's time to get ready for bed, or point to the wall clock. It's time for bed. So you might use some gestures. Engage in active listening and show genuine interest, like I just talked about. And again, give them plenty of time to respond. The important thing is to make sure their dignity and their autonomy is not violated at any time when you're communicating with a person living with dementia. The importance of patience in communication. Remember, they're going to take longer to process and respond. So again, rushing is just going to frustrate them. That's going to, angle their anxiety up. So again, keep it smooth and quiet and calm. It allows for more relaxed and effective interaction, which is really important. Becoming a caregiver for many of you started with a diagnosis. And then it's important that you contact someone that can help you with that person's finances and their healthcare wishes. And the best person to contact on that would be your elder law attorney. And there's plenty of them. If you need a referral, we've got plenty of elder law attorneys on our list. We're not particular. We don't recommend one more than the other. We'll give you 3 or 4 names and you can decide that, and you can talk to them, talk to their administrative assistant and see if this is a good fit for you. Take advantage of community sources, alzheimers.org if they have dementia. LewyBody.org is another one that's great for someone who has Lewy body. American Arthritis Association, American Heart Association, they all have good community resources. And then find support either within your own family, within friends, or even joining a support group. We have 2 Zoom support groups that a lot of our caregivers come to. They don't have to leave the house. It's in the evening when maybe someone else is home or mom or dad is in bed, and it really is helpful for them. So care suggestions for a person living with dementia. I would say that any of these suggestions is a good suggestion for anybody who has a chronic disease or you're just caregiving for an older adult. I think you need to keep that daily routine the same and keep it simple. When the routine is the same, you have breakfast, you have lunch, you have dinner at the same time, you get dressed at the same time. For you, it might seem a little boring, but for that older adult or someone who has a chronic disease or dementia, that makes them feel safe. Try to engage in activities such as music, laughter, simple puzzles, reminiscing, and conversations. I did a program on laughter once, and after it was over, the man came up to me and said, I miss my wife's laugh. I wish she would laugh more. And I said, I love Lucy, the candy on the conveyor belt, or anything from Carol Burnett, anything that is slapstick or visual comedy, they're going to laugh at. They're not going to laugh at jokes because they don't get them, but they see someone getting hit with a plastic bat, or they might see someone trip, or and a funny trip, of course, not getting hurt, and they might find that funny. For people with dementia, you want to make sure that you've got safety locks on cabinets and doors, and keep their medicine and other household products high up on shelves. So, you might say, well, my mother doesn't have dementia, I'm just caregiving for her, but she may have a visual problem, and she might pick up something that is a cleaning product and think that it is ginger ale. So again, you want to keep that stuff where it's not a danger to anybody. You always want to give them at least 2 to 3 options. And this really talks about autonomy and personhood and making them feel like they still have some options. So instead of going to the closet and say, Mom, you're wearing the red shirt today because it's Valentine's Day, you might say, Mom, I've got a red shirt and I have a pink shirt and it's Valentine's Day today. Which one would you like to wear? And if they don't come up with a good answer within, that 15 seconds, you can try to coax them and say, it's Valentine's Day. I bought you this new shirt for Valentine's Day. You might want to try it today. I washed it. It's nice and soft. Or, do you like the pink one? The pink is your color and you're going to look great on that. You're going to look good on both of them, Mom, but which one do you like better? So we're really using respect and dignity. You never want to use elders speak to them, which is talking like a baby. It's very disrespectful. And when you're reminiscing with someone who has dementia, you never want to say, do you remember? Because they don't. You're always going to say, I remember. You never want to say, I told you this before. It's I remember. I remember when we went on vacation to Hawaii and we went to the top of that mountain and saw that volcano. That might trigger some memories for that person. And remember that changes in behavior are almost always a form of communication for an unmet need. Think of your needs as being internal triggers or external triggers. And your internal triggers, things that will precipitate a behavior, is they're hungry, they're thirsty, they have to go to the bathroom, they're in pain. Triggers that are more environmental is it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too crowded, it's too noisy. So what is setting them off? That's what we have to figure out, but start eliminating some of those triggers. I think what's important is really to be present for them. I think more than anything, that's what a person with dementia really wants, or a person who you're caregiving for. Be fully engaged with them. Minimize their distractions. Use positive body language, facing them when you're talking, making eye contact, reaching your hand out to hold their hand. Active listening. So what you're saying to me, Mom, is that you don't like going to that music show because it's too noisy for you. So that's active listening, is replaying what they said so they know you listened, but they also know you understood it. Above all, we need patience and flexibility. And again, validation and affirmation, and always be in the moment with them. It's really important that you share that with them. Last but very not least is taking care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. Take time daily away from caregiving. Ask and accept help. Take care of your personal health. They did a study on caregivers who had caregived for family members for a certain amount of time. I think it was, off the top of my head, I believe it was 4 years. And what they found was the caregivers had higher blood pressure than the people they were caring for, more cardiac problems, more dental problems. Why? Because they weren't taking care of those things. They weren't going to the doctor. They weren't following up on it. So you need to think about finding someone that you can trust, that you can leave that person with, so you can take care of your health, but also make sure that that you get out and you get some me time, because it's true, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today, and we will see you next time.